everyone, it's Caitlin Cahill, the geek you need. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create habit trackers in Word. I'm going to show you two different layouts. I'm going to start with this one-page layout that has one table for all of your habits with the days of the month down the side of the table. And then I'm also going to show you this other kind of layout that has a separate table for each habit. So let's go ahead and get started. So to start off with, I have my typical 8.5 by 11 document in Word. And once again, the first thing I'm going to do is under Layout, I'm going to change those margins. The default is 1 inch all around. I'm going to turn it to the narrow 1/2 inch because that gives me more space to work with, but is still compatible with printing on KDP. So now that I have my margins, I am going to add a header at the top. And we'll start with January. You can style that header however you would like it to look. And most importantly, make sure you set the font size to how you want it to be. And then return down a few times because you're going to need that space for those diagonal lines at the top. And then after you have that space in place, change your font back to what you would want the numbers on the table to be. So usually about a 10 to 12 font size, and then something a little bit more readable like a sans serif. Now I'm going to insert the table, and I'm going to have 31 rows, one for each day of the month. And I find that on an 8.5 by 11 page that 30 columns usually works out well. You may have to adjust this number depending on the page size that you're working with. And I want to fit to the window size. So now I have a nice table here, but I want these grids to be a little bit more square. So under the layout with everything selected, I'm going to change the height and the width to 1/4 inch. And if you do that and it looks a little off, you may have to check your cell margins to make sure that all of your cell margins are set to 0. So there's no extra padding in there. Now in Word, if you go to View and turn on your grid lines, you can see that this box is actually a little bit outside of the printing space. So I actually maybe want one less column here. And then after I've deleted that column, I just want to make sure that the widths are back to 1/4 inch each. So now that I have my table, let's go ahead and add our days of the month down the left column. And I'm just using my down arrow to navigate between each cell. I'm going to select that column so now that I can center the text, and then under Layout, I can use the cell alignment to make sure it's right in the middle of the cell there. And then of course I can change the color and the font size. So now that I have my numbers set, I'm going to add the diagonal lines at the top. Now I can actually see there's some space down at the bottom. Since I want this to be as large as possible, I'm going to select the space at the top, and I'm going to increase the size until it adds another page. Now I could print it like this because you can see none of the table went off the page, just that invisible paragraph that Word adds there. But just for the sake of today to keep it on one screen, I'm going to go a little bit smaller. So I have a little extra space. And now if I go back to View and turn on my grid lines, this will make it a little bit easier for me to add my diagonals in. And actually I'm going to turn this table so it aligns with the grid. I'm going to line it back left. So then under my Insert menu, I can add a line. So from the Shapes menu, I'm just going to grab a plain old line. And I want to start it just to the right of the column here. And I start right here at this corner. And then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 spots over. And then I'm going to go up so that it's just under where the header ends. And there's my first line. Now you can see the default is a blue line, so we're actually going to change the color here to black. And the table borders are 1/2 inch, so it is the same size as my diagonal line. But I find that diagonals look thinner, so we are going to actually change the weight to just a little bit bigger at 3/4 of an inch. So now that I have that line, I need enough to span this whole area. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that and I'm going to do Command D or Control D on a PC, which will copy and paste a new copy. And I'm going to figure out, now because I went 3 lines over, the last column I'm going to be able to do while still keeping it within the page is going to be this one. So I'm going to move that over here, make sure it aligns up there. So now that I have those two, these columns actually won't be used, so we'll take the borders off those in a minute. So now let's see, we have 26 columns, which means we need 25 more lines because we already have the beginning and the ending one. So I'm going to go ahead and select this one, and I'm going to duplicate that 25 times. So now that I have the number that I need, I'm going to hold down that Shift key, and I'm going to select all of the lines that I have there already. And then under Shape Format, under Align, I'm going to align them to the top, and then I'm going to align them. I'm going to distribute them horizontally, so that'll space them out according to the columns there. And while they're all selected, I'm also going to group them. So now I can move and I can change the size all together. So now they're spaced evenly, but you can see they don't quite match up, so we'll have to do some adjustment here. So remember, these last 2 columns here aren't being used, so we want the last line to line up to the left of these last 2 columns. Now if you're resizing and you find that it's not wanting to stick to that last line there, it's because it's snapping to the grid lines, which are off. So hold down the Shift key while you resize, and that'll take away that snap so that you can align it a little more precisely. And then to make sure, you can always zoom in and see how nicely your lines line up. So you can see they go a little bit below onto the table here. So I'm just gonna, because it's selected as a group, I'm just gonna use my arrow key to nudge it up a little bit. So now I can see if I scroll across, all the lines are nicely lined up across the top. So there you go. There's a very basic habit tracker. You can do additional design elements to really make it stand out. For example, making each alternate row a different color to make it stand out. So if you want to do that, you can select an entire row by clicking just to the left of it, and then hold down your Command key on a Mac or Control key on a PC, and select the rows that you want to change the color of. And then under your table design, now you can see there are some pre-formatted designs that have alternating colors, but selecting one of these will change your entire table style. So I prefer to do it manually by selecting the rows and then changing the shading to a different color here. And there you go, you have alternating colors. And then obviously on other months, for example, the next one being February, you would want to change the number of rows to match the month. And so for February, I would select those bottom 3 rows, delete the rows, and then change the header. And now I have my February month. And then the other thing I like to do, because we don't have a diagonal line up here, I also like to hide these 2 columns. I don't delete them because that changes the sizing, and so instead I just select these 2, and I'm going to turn off under the table design, I'm going to turn the shading back to white, and I'm going to make sure there's no borders. Now when I turn to no borders on that one, it takes this border off, so we're going to change that to make sure that right border comes back. There you go. So now you don't even know that there's 2 columns there. And that's my basic habit tracker that I like to include on planners that have monthly layouts. So for this next habit tracker, we're going to do a layout that has a separate table for each habit that you want to track, still with up to 31 cells for one cell for each day of the month. So just like before, I'm starting with my standard 8.5 by 11 page. You can do any size page you'd like. And then the first thing I always do is change those margins down to a 1/2 inch. That gives me more space to work with, but keeps it compatible with KDP. So to begin with, I'm going to add my header. And actually for this one, we're going to have a space at the top for a month. So instead of just typing my header, let's do a table instead. So this table will make it easy to have an underline for that month. And actually let's do 2 more so we can add the year in here. So we're going to do a 4-column table. Make sure to style this and size it the way you want before you add the additional content. So we're going to make it a little bigger. We're going to change the font. And I want the columns with the words to be just big enough to fit the words. And then what I'm going to do under table design, first thing I'm going to do is actually just remove all the borders. And you could leave it like that. I'm going to give a line for people to write on. So I'm going to select this column that's next to the month and add back in that border bottom. And then same with the one next to the year. So now that I have a table at the top for my header, now I'm going to add a table for my habit. So to begin with, we're just going to type a header for this next one and style it. Now I want a little space in between each one. I could enter down, but instead I find it a little bit more consistent to use my line spacing. So I'm going to do 6 points before the header and 3 points after. And then under the styles pane, I am actually going to make this my heading 2. I'm going to update my heading 2 to match that style, and then I'm going to make it a heading 2 so that if I want to edit all of my headings later, it makes it easy to apply the style to all the headings at once. So now that I have my header in place, I'm going to add my table. So you could do 1 row with all the days of the month. I'm going to do 2 rows with 16 each, which gives me 32 days. And then I take the last one out to have 31. Just gives me a little bit more space in those boxes. So if people want to color, or some people like doodling within their days, it just gives them a little bit more space. So 16 columns and 2 rows, and then I'm going to auto fit the size of the table to the window, which means it's going to fill the whole page, or the width of the page. So now that I have my table in there, first thing I'm going to do is actually change my cell margins because I want to make sure there's no extra padding throwing off the size of the cells. So I'm going to make that to 0. And then I'm going to make sure that the height and the width match. So you can see the width is a little bigger than the height right now. So what I can do is I can increase that until they match. Now it's a little too big at 0.5. And I saw the 0.47 popped up there, so we're going to try 0.47. That gives me nice square tables, and we can see it's still within the page margins. If we want to make sure, under View, turn on those grid lines again, and make sure that your table is within the grids. Looks good. So now I'm going to add the days of the month to the table. So just type within the cells, and you can use the Tab key to move between cells. Then we're going to select those cells, and under the layout I want to choose the center alignment so that the text goes in the middle. And then I like to make it so that the lines are a little lighter. So with the table selected, I can change under table design all the borders. They're currently a 1/2 inch black. We're just going to make them a little lighter gray. Also uses less ink. So with 1/2 inch gray set, I'm going to select that all borders again. Make sure my table is selected. And then I'm going to change the numbers as well to slightly lighter gray. This will allow people to color over them or write over them if they need to. So now that I have the basic layout of my table, I actually want to remove this last border here. Under table design. We're going to go uncheck the right border and uncheck the bottom border. So now that I have what I need here, I'm going to copy the header plus the table. I'm going to do Command C and then Command V to paste. And I'm going to do that until it fills the page. Now it added a second page here, but there's no actual content on it. If I turn on the marks, you can see there's just an empty paragraph. Sometimes if you select that and cut it, it'll go. Sometimes Word just doesn't want to delete that. So another trick you can do to get rid of this empty page is just decrease the font until it's small enough to fit back on this page. Now, because I made all of these a heading 2, if I wanted to change the size of them, I can go my heading 2, select all. And then I can increase or decrease the size. Now it looks like it took and made these the heading 2 as well, so I'm actually going to go and change these to a heading 3. First I'm going to make the heading 3 match the style. And let's make this font just a little smaller. Update to match the selection again, and then change it to a heading 3. So ideally I would have done that before, but because I forgot, we'll just do it real quick here. It helps if you have your table set before you copy it. Obviously, then you don't have to go through and change each table individually. Okay, so now I'm going to select all those heading 2s. So now I can do, let's say I want a little bit more space at the top. I can do that. And again, it pushed it over onto the next page, so I might delete a table. Select those heading 2s again and just add a little bit more space. And there you have a basic habit tracker for a month with each habit has its own separate table. Now you could use this as is for any number of months. For example, on a February, you would just not use the 29, 30, and 31, obviously. Or you could do is you could make a version for each length of month. So once you have your 31 days, it's really easy to go back in and just do it again for a 30-day month. So you could just delete the last cell in each table, but again, I find it easier to do one and then copy, so we'll delete these. And then we'll delete the 31, and then under table design, remove those borders. So now that I have my 30 days, I'll go ahead and select that again. and then paste it to fill the table. So you do that for each month, 30-day month, 31-day month, 28-day month for February. And if you're feeling, extra, you could also do the 29 for those leap years. So there you go. You have 2 different styles of habit trackers to include either as printables to sell or within your KDP planners.
Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments if there's anything else you need to know to be successful on your KDP journey.